Well, Rachel, it's 9:01. I see that we have 35 other people on. And so I will, thanks everybody for being on today. Some of you know Rachel from before. She is with WinTAC, which is our technical assistance provider. And she is, she's a wonderful trainer. She's been at our in-service before a couple of years ago, and it's really nice to have her back. She also helped us out with our comprehensive statewide needs assessment based out of the Casper office a couple of years ago. So some of you there might have had a chance to meet her in person there as well. With that, Rachel, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Let me make sure I can get this working. Can everyone see the PowerPoint?
I believe so.
Okay, perfect. So let's see. Okay, I'm going to make sure I watch the chat too. So thanks everybody. I'm excited to talk to you all about this. I don't know, like Jeff said, gosh, what was that? May of 18 probably, that we were there talking about some of this initial stuff. And so we know a lot more than we did in 18. I also know that there might be some new staff and a lot's changed since 2018. So I'm excited to talk to you all mostly about credential attainment and measurable skill gains. But there's a lot of other information that you need to know in order to understand those things. So we've got a lot to cover today. Like Jeff said, I am happy for you to jump in and ask questions. I'll also make sure I monitor the chat so that we can address things as they happen. This can be as informal as you guys need it. So we're going to go for 2 hours today, and then hopefully we'll get to the stopping point in the presentation, but if not, we are coming back on Thursday so we can make any adjustments as needed, because I want you guys to be able to get as much out of this as you can. So please don't hesitate to ask me to cover something again or re-explain, or if you have additional questions, because again, I want this to be about you, and so we'll just take it as we go. So the basic things that we want to cover today are, first of all, I want you to understand the basic components of the WIOA performance measures, but particularly, we're going to cover credential attainment and measurable skill gains. So we're going to talk, I want you to make sure that you understand those, because those are really important for VR agencies right now, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit. But we're also going to cover some of this through the example of Jane, who's our VR participant. We might have used the Jane example back in 2018, so if that sounds familiar to any of you, that could be why. So I wanted to keep that consistent in case some of you can build on that knowledge. So again, I think anytime counselors can look at this through a client scenario or from your day-to-day work, it can really help understand the performance measures and how they impact your role and the clients you're serving a little bit more. So we're going to be having a few client scenarios that we go over between today and Thursday. So we're going to review the participant examples and discuss potential outcomes. And that's going to include credentials, MSGs, and some of the long-term successes that we're going to be looking for. So even though we're not going to spend a ton of time on the long-term indicators, we're still going to address them a little bit, and you'll understand how MSGs and credentials play a part in all of the long-term outcomes as well. And then Thursday, before we wrap up, I'm going to hand it back over to your Wyoming leadership and get some updates. And I don't know who's doing that, Jeff, maybe Brian, maybe you, maybe some others, talking about where Wyoming is at with your case management system, where you're at with policy and procedures and any of that kind of stuff, because it all plays a role here.
Yes, Brian Hickman is the one who does our reporting for MSG. And so he's kind of prepared to talk about that aspect, as well as kind of how it's done from our current case management system, which will be changing later here in the year. And so he can talk about that whenever you'd like him to.
Okay, great. And I'm just so excited for you guys to get that updated system. I think it's really gonna be a game changer for all of you. So that's really exciting. It won't feel exciting when you're learning the new system and migrating, but other than that, it's gonna feel great. Okay, so we're going to start off by just talking a little bit about WIOA. This part's going to be kind of a summary for you. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. So I just want to set the background and kind of give you some of the big picture items that bring us to the performance measures. And then we're going to get right into credential attainment and measurable skill gains. As you all know, WIOA was signed into law on July 22nd of 2014. The legislation and its implementing regulations were designed to strengthen and improve the nation's public workforce development system and help Americans with significant barriers to employment, including individuals with disabilities, into high-quality jobs and careers, and help employers hire and retain skilled workers. So quiz time for you all. July 22nd of 2014 is when President Obama signed the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Does anyone know when RSA, so RFEDS, the Rehabilitation Services Administration, finally published their regulations for VR agencies? And feel free to, just type in the chat if you know. Okay, so Anne's correct. It was August of 2016. So more than 2 years after the law passed, we finally got regulations. And then, does anyone know when RSA published the technical assistance outlining the performance measure requirements? Any guesses there? And there's been a lot of things that have come out. So 2014 was the law, 2016 were the regulations, and then it wasn't until 2017 to 2018, depending on what guidance came out, is that RSA started publishing additional information on the performance measures. So we knew what they were. We knew that Section 116 of WIOA outlined the requirements, but we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the resources. And ever since then, we've been getting random pieces of guidance and definitions that have come out over the last few years. The reason I wanted to bring that up for all of you is because even though it now is August of 2020, we still have not fully, and this I'm talking about mostly the VR system, we have not fully implemented the performance measures. So 6 years or more after the law passed, we're still probably, I would say, gosh, depending on how you look at it, 3 to 5 years out from fully implementing the Section 116 of WIOA. And we're going to get into that a little bit. And the reason I want you to know that is because there are some things that will continue to change over time, and we're going to get additional requirements, and we're going to see how some of this finally starts to roll out in the coming years. This is probably a reminder for most of you, but under WIOA, there's 6 core programs. So under Title I, we've got the adult program, the dislocated worker program, and the youth program. Under Title II, we've got the Adult Ed and Family Literacy Act program. Under Title III, we've got the Wagner-Pizer Employment Services program, and Title IV is the VR program. The reason I want to make sure you all know who the 6 core programs are is because when we're talking about section 116 of WIOA and the performance accountability system, all of these 6 core programs are measured on the same indicators. We all serve different individuals and we have our own eligibility criteria and we have our own services under, the Rehab Act for us. But it's really important for you to know that we're all getting measured the same way at the federal level. It's supposed to increase our partnership with each other. It's supposed to help eliminate some of that double dipping. So making sure that we're not providing the same services that maybe the adult program is, but if we partner together, kind of we all succeed mentality. So there's a lot of benefits to knowing who your 6 core partners are. So in Wyoming, can you guys tell me where Title I, the adult program, the dislocated worker program, and the youth programs, where are those provided in the state of Wyoming?
Rachel, those are all part of our workforce services, which we are part of. The employment and training division handles those, as well as Title III.
Okay, perfect. I think that was that Brian?
Yes, sorry, Rachel.
Thanks. No, that's fine. Thanks, Brian. And so we've got all of the Title III programs under workforce, which you guys are actually under that organization, right? So
Correct.
can anyone tell me what kind of services you can your clients can get under Wagner Pizer? Okay, Tammy's guessing retraining. Okay, any other guesses? Okay, so the lack of guesses or information, I am going to assume that maybe we need to do a little bit of development in that area. So in your case management system, do you guys recall that you have to document these partners in your case management system? Oh, and there's lots of guesses coming in. So there's Power, I'm not sure what that one is. Resume help, job searches on Wyoming Works, single moms, job search help. Okay, absolutely. So it's important for you guys to know, because when you're developing an IPE, that's the point in time where you guys have to tell RSA that the person you're serving is also being served by one of these 6 core programs. So you might know that they're all part of the workforce system in Wyoming, but we also need to know the different services that these programs provide so that you can, as accurately as possible, document what other programs they're receiving services from. So yeah, Wagner Pizer generally is going to provide those basic services that are available to everybody. So some of those, resume help, job searching on Wyoming Works, job search, mock interviews. Yeah, some of those basic services that anyone can get. Generally, anytime somebody needs training or more intensive services, they actually have to be qualified for the youth, dislocated worker, or adult program in order to get those training services. So, and same with adult ed, what types of services are at adult ed, who administers that in Wyoming? So those are some of the things that you guys need to make sure you have knowledge in so that you can be asking some of those leading questions to make sure you document appropriately what program someone's potentially getting services under. Now, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to get any data sharing. Across the country, there's some agencies that do direct data sharing, so this happens automatically. Most agencies, counselors, are just required to ask those leading questions and figure out as much as possible. So just do the best that you can, but just make sure you truly understand all 6 of these programs, who they are, and what services that they provide, so that you can document those accurately. Also, so that you can refer to those programs, because like I said before, it's kind of we're all in it together mentality from the performance measure perspective. And so if somebody could benefit from help with their resume or taking a resume building workshop, then you could send them to Workforce to get that, and it might be under Wagner Pizer. Or if you're working in transition and the youth program might be able to provide some services while you're providing others, getting them connected with that program would be beneficial. So just keep that in mind just in your day-to-day practice. And Jeff clarified that adult ed is administered through the Community College Commission. So, and Brian also said, we're working at the admin level to develop a process to share data on referrals, shared clients, etc. More details to come. So awesome. Thanks, Brian. And maybe you can give a little bit more about that on Thursday when we talk. Okay, next, now I want to say, let's put on our VR hats. So there's a lot of times where we're talking about strictly WIOA and how it impacts the VR program. Other times we're talking specifically about VR. So this section right here comes directly from the preamble in the VR regulations. It says that the foundation of the VR program is the principle that individuals with disabilities, including those with the most significant disabilities, are capable of achieving high quality, competitive, integrated employment when provided the necessary services and supports. To increase the employment of individuals with disabilities in the competitive integrated labor market, the workforce system, so remember the workforce system being all those 6 core programs, must provide individuals with disabilities opportunities to participate in job-driven training and to pursue high quality employment. So what I really like about this is it emphasizes high quality, competitive, integrated employment. Now, being in VR, we all know that everyone has their own definition of high quality. Some folks want to be able to supplement their Social Security income, and that's high quality to them. To other folks, it is having insurance, being able to pay their mortgage. So to other folks, it might be contributing to a good cause, depending on what their place of employment does. To some of us, it might just be having a career pathway, opportunities for advancement, so that you're not stuck in the same job for years. So high quality can be defined very differently from everybody. So I want to look at this next paragraph where it says, we need to provide opportunities. So under the law and these new performance measures, it's not saying that everybody has to go to college and get a degree. What it is saying, under the VR program, we have to make sure that we are providing individuals with disabilities, including the most significant disabilities, opportunities to participate in job-driven training and to pursue high-quality employment outcomes. So from the counselor perspective, that might be making some adjustments to different practices that you have. Maybe it's making sure people have some entry-level work for a period of time so that they can practice skills, they can see what their strengths and weaknesses are while they're going to go to a training program. Maybe it's helping people with the most significant disabilities enter into on-the-job trainings with employers, rather than maybe just getting a job coach trying to find them entry-level placement. I don't know, it's probably going to be different for everybody, but those are the things I want as we go through the performance indicators and talk about Jane. I really want you to remember the language from the preamble that says we need to make sure we're providing opportunities for job-driven training and so that folks can pursue high-quality employment. Does anyone have any questions about that or any comments? Okay.
I don't see any questions.
Nope. Okay, we'll go on. So this is just a visual for you all to see how the program has changed because of the performance measures. Most of you by now, I mean, we just talked about how the law passed 6 years ago. So most of you probably feel this in your day-to-day work. But before WIOA, we really focused on someone having a job for 90 days. That was our goal. That was what showed that we were successful. And that was it. And it didn't matter if somebody lost their job on day 92 and came back and reapplied. We would just find them another job. And as soon as they kept it for 90 days, we would get another successful closure. Obviously, that wasn't always the intent, but that's kind of the system that we lived in. Now, under WIOA, we're focusing on getting people in careers, or at least career pathways, where they're not just stuck in entry level. We're also looking at providing skills and training for them so that they actually have industry specific skills, not just generic skills from entry level employment, but they can be competitive in the labor market, and specifically in the labor market in Wyoming, unless they actually want to leave or move somewhere else, so that they're set up for long-term success. And by long-term success, I mean after they exit the VR program, but also making sure they have higher wages. Maybe they have benefits, just making sure that they can be self-sufficient based on the type of employment that they have. Yes, they still have to have a job for 90 days. That's still in our regulations. But the regulations do say that somebody has to maintain a job for a minimum of 90 days. It needs to match their job goal. And hopefully it's going to provide opportunity for advancement and meet that person's long-term goals. So it can be perceived very differently from prior to WIOA.
And Rachel, I'm not sure if you're going to talk about this later on in the presentation, but one of the things I see missing from the WIOA side there, specifically as related to VR, is the competitive integrative employment aspect, which that was certainly not prioritized previously, but is under the WIOA model.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. We're kind of raising the standard for employment for people with disabilities. It changes the expectations for our partners, our vendors, our CRPs, but also employers. So one of the aspects, thanks for bringing that up, Jeff. One of the aspects of WIOA too is that we have two partners. We have employers and the job seekers or people with disabilities for VR. And one of those is also raising those expectations for employers to provide job accommodations, to actually hire people with disabilities, and to make sure that people do have competitive integrated employment rather than non-integrated or non-compensated along with everybody else. So, and that's still a huge change going at. There's a lot of politics around that, as I'm sure you guys can imagine. So yeah, there's definitely things still changing with that as well. And I will explain how that cut. Well, we might not get into that fully, so let me know if you want me to touch on anything else, Jeff, but we'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so two things, you guys probably know this by now, but just for sake of the training, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Under the federal fiscal year from October 1st through September 30th, that used to be when we would be on track for closures, right? By September 30th, you had to have all of your 26s or all of your successful closures finished for the agency's performance and probably for your own performance evaluations. A lot of agencies are still on this time frame with their counselor expectations, so this still might be what you're following. I'm not sure. Jeff, are you guys still following a federal fiscal year for closure expectations or anything like that?
Yes.
Okay, so if you guys, anyone in the chat too, if you have to get 20 closures by the end of the year, September 30th is your deadline still? Okay, got a yes. So it's not, I'm going to say that that's everybody. Okay, so that actually was based on the old system, and a lot of states are still having counselors get those closures by September 30th, but I want to make sure that you also understand that we're functioning on 2 different years now. So our annual report and our performance expectations is no longer for October 1st through September 30th. That is still when we get our grant award. So that's still when the feds will issue the grant award, and you have to have your match and all these different things is still fiscally on the federal year. For the program year, this is now when VR's performance is going to be measured. So July 1 through June 30th. So starting on July 1 of each year, that restarts the clock for the agency having to meet some of these new performance measures. So when we get into credentials and measurable skill gains, I'll explain that a little bit more. So June 30th now is the cutoff for some of the performance measures, when before it was September 30th. So please just keep that in mind. So for example, if you have to document, hopefully some of you are doing this. If not, we'll get into it in the training, but if you're documenting the transcript of somebody that's in a college program, say that they're in an associate degree program, and at the end of May or June, when they finish their semester, you document that they earn 12 credits in college, okay? That would be a measurable skill gain. You have until June 30th to actually earn that skill gain, and for you guys to actually document that. Maybe they earned it, maybe the semester ended on May 15th, and that's when they earned it. You have until June 30th to actually document that May 15th measurable skill gain, because the clock starts over on July 1st. And then you lose it. You can't backdate it. It doesn't count anymore. If you miss the documentation, too bad. So the clock starts over on July 1. Again, that's really important because we're going to talk about your agency's accountability, and your agency is going to be held to this July 1 through June 30th timeframe for their performance. Therefore, counselors in the agency will probably be held to the same standard. So let's get into that a little bit more. A couple of other terms I want you to understand as we go through the training, and I'm going to use these. I've been using some different terms, but I'll try to use these throughout the rest of the training. We've got reportable individuals. So for VR, that's anyone prior to IPE. So if you're serving any potentially eligible students with disabilities, anyone that's maybe eligible, but you're in the development of the IPE, any of those individuals are called reportable individuals. All that means is we have less requirements to send to the federal government because we're not under a plan for employment. Also, it's important to know that those individuals, before they get into an IPE, they're not going to be included in the performance measures that we're going to talk about. So they would just be excluded from any of the calculations or any expectations. Once they enter into an IPE, so they're eligible, they have an IPE, it's signed by you and the client, and then they start receiving VR services. So that can be VR counseling and guidance, it can be a paid service through an authorization, or any service under their IPE. That's when they become a program participant. A participant is really important to know because once somebody's a participant, then they are potentially included in the performance measures. So after that time, once they're in an IPE, if you close their case is a successful closure in competitive integrated employment, the agency is going to be held accountable whether that person is still working 6 months down the road and 1 year down the road. And if they're not, then those will be negative outcomes for the agency. So we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that once someone becomes a participant under an IPE and receiving services, that's when the performance measures come into play. And then the term exit. So the term exit can be used for VR, it can be used synonymously with closure. So for you guys, as soon as you close somebody's case, that's when they exit the VR program. It's way more complicated than that. But I really like this because what we're saying when we're reporting that individuals' cases are closed, we're no longer reporting that someone was a successful outcome or an unsuccessful outcome. What we're reporting is that an individual exited the VR program, and then we report why they exited the program. And the reason people leave the program there's a variety of them. Sometimes it's because they're unable to locate. Sometimes they exit because they have a job in competitive integrated employment and they're working successfully. Sometimes they leave the program because of a medical or health issue and they can't participate in the program. Sometimes they exit because they're ineligible for the program. So the reason that they exit is can vary, but it's a really great change because it's no longer just closing somebody's case successful or unsuccessful. Now, at the very beginning of this, I gave you some information about how the law passed in 2014, but we're still pretty far out from finishing the implementation of Section 116 of WIOA. And here's a little bit more information on that. So let me know if you guys have any questions. When this all started, we didn't have to start reporting for WIOA until July 1 of 2017. So 3 years after the law passed. That's when we started using the new 911 and reporting all of the requirements for WIOA. We had 2 years of reporting that was considered our baseline reporting period. So this gave states an opportunity to just report whatever was happening in the program. Because the measures we're going to talk about were so new to VR, we didn't have any data. So they had to give some leeway for states to actually start gathering that data. So that was our baseline reporting period. For measurable skill gains, that was July 1st of 2017 through June 30th of 2019. Now, VR is going to continue baseline period for the other performance indicators. So that's why your agency wanted to make sure you had a training on NMSGs, because it is the one right now that your agency is going to be held accountable for. All of the other 5 indicators, you're still in baseline and just reporting what happens. The way that all of this gets reported is through your RSA 911 data or in your case management system. So I can't stress enough about the importance of timely and accurate reporting. All of those random checkboxes or any of those pieces on your quarterly certification form, sometimes that's daunting and you know, can be frustrating to have to always fill out and check some boxes, but everything in there is so crucial to different pieces of our overall reporting system that I just want to encourage you guys to make sure that you're taking some extra time to make sure that it's timely and to make sure that it's accurate to the best of your abilities. So every quarter, you know this probably by now, but every quarter we report the 911 and your agency has 45 days after the quarter ends. So that's why if say June 30th ends the 4th quarter, that means you have until August 15th to submit your 4th quarter report. So I don't know, Brian, if you guys have submitted that yet or if you're still working on that, but that's why during that 45 days, you might be hearing from Brian or from other folks saying, hey, there's some errors in your system. I need you to go back and fix this. This is why, because of the quarterly reporting requirements. And we just started, as of July 1st of 2020, the RSA 911 was amended again. And so we've got some new changes in the reporting. So it's kind of constantly evolving, which can probably be frustrating from the counselor level, but it's really important for implementing Section 116 of WIOA and just making the system better. And then lastly, those 4 quarter worth of reports every single year. So remember, starting on July 1 and the 4 quarters after that up until June 30th, RSA actually uses all 4 quarters to pre-populate an annual report for us, and it is due by October 1st every single year. So in that report, you're going to know how many measurable skill gains you got, if you're meeting your performance. You're also going to be seeing your baseline data for some of the other measures, but that annual report is what actually goes to Congress to say how Wyoming vocational rehabilitation is actually performing and serving people with individuals. Gosh, individuals with disabilities. Sorry about that.
Rachel,
Yeah.
if I could interject real quick. When you talk about the 9/11 data, a lot of those things are the reminders that Brian will send out, or Brian and Kate Taylor will send out throughout each quarter, just making sure a specific form is filled out, or for a consumer, or just a reminder to make sure you have certain things complete. That's generally why they send those reminders out, is because so that they can pull, when they pull the data for the report, it's something that it's as accurate data as we can make possible. So just to kind of add that on. And I didn't know if Brian wanted to add anything to that or not.
Sorry, Jeff, I'm here now. I've calls all over the place. So specifically what we look for the 9/11, is that what we're kind of trying to make sure we're getting in there? Or,
Yes.
so yeah, in the information in winners that we pull into the 9/11 report is pretty much everything that's on that IPE WIOA form or the quarterly form. And trying to think of, and it's, Rachel's been covering most of the data points. It's just the way that's written in there might be weird, and we're correcting language, but sorry, I'm just trying to think of anything specific. And on Thursday, when we cover some more things, Rachel, I'll see if I can have more information, or at least the forms, so people can see exactly what we're looking and what we need. If
Yeah,
that will
sounds
help.
good. Well, and also, you know, when you guys get your new case management system, that's the perfect storm for additional errors to come through. So when you get a new case management system, sometimes that will create additional fixes and information coming from you to staff. So we were just kind of trying to talk about that 45-day period and why fixes or error corrections or all those things kind of are sent out, and there's a pretty quick turnaround. And it's just because of the expectations that your agency has on some of these reporting requirements.
And that's one of the benefits we have with Libra right now is about a month before the quarter ends, Alan Hood, who is their data person for us, sends us a report of all potential errors for that quarter. So Kate starts working a month before the quarter's end to clear errors. And so we're usually good about sending in our report to RSA a day or two after it's due. So we usually don't need the full 45 days. We just submitted the closeout report for program year 19. I have to stop and think of what year it is. And we used 40 of the 45 days because of the number of errors we had to correct.
Okay.
And most of them are these newer things. To give us a head start on the quarter we're in now, he's already sent us the error report, and we're just under 3,000 errors that have to be corrected, which is astronomical considering we've been lucky to keep it at 200 a quarter. And most of these are these new data reporting, the MSG and employment verifications that are causing these errors.
Well, great. So maybe this training will help with some of those errors.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
staff will be hearing from Kate before the week's out on things that are old errors that keep coming up so that we can start focusing on the new errors.
Okay. Well, and you know, it sounds like, actually, I really like that you guys aren't waiting till just the end of the quarter during that 45 days to start fixing errors. So as field staff and counselors out there, you're probably getting communications all the time, depending on what your agency's finding. So the more you can learn about where those errors are coming from and why they're happening, make sure you start to implement those into your daily practice to prevent some of those errors. So because there was a bunch of reporting changes starting on July 1, I'm not surprised there's a ton of errors. But so we just kind of have to learn how we're supposed to do them now, what changes they were made. Some of that is out of the counselor's control. Some of that Brian's going to have to deal with Alan. But yeah, so we just want to make sure you guys understand kind of how all these pieces connect and what a crucial role you have in the documentation piece. So thanks for that, Brian. And yeah, anything you want to share on Thursday would be great. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to share is your MSG rates and targets. Now, you guys might have had some of this sent out to you, and I just want to, if not, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page of what this means. So, MSG rates and targets. Like I said, for program year 17 and program year 18, so that was July 1 of 2017 through June 30th of 2019. That was your baseline period for MSG. The reason that you only finished a baseline period for the MSG indicators for measurable skill gains was because measurable skill gains are calculated on an annual basis during a program year. The rest of the indicators, they don't actually get calculated until after somebody exits the program. So the only indicator that we have 2 years worth of data on are MSGs, because the time frames are so long after someone exits the program that we just don't have enough information yet. So for right now, you're only going to be held accountable as an agency to meeting targets for measurable skill gains. So during this next 2 years, while you're working on measurable skill gains, it's going to be really important to also learn about the employment indicators, the median earnings indicators, and credential attainment, because they all kind of tie together, even though they're on different time frames. In 2 very short years, you're going to have targets, like we're going to talk about with MSGs. You're going to have targets on all 5 of the participant indicators. And so then you're going to be held to another standard. So we want to do the best we can over the next 2 years to learn and improve and really assess where we're at. So during your baseline period, in program year 17, you guys documented 31.1% MSGs, and in program year 18, you documented 30% MSGs. Now, if you guys are like any other VR agency out there, I would bet that you are unsure the accuracy of either of those 2 numbers. The reason I say that is because in 17, a lot of agencies didn't know what they were doing and kind of were doing the best that they could. And then also, depending on policies and procedures agencies have had available and also trainings in this area, a lot of times counselors are out there just documenting the best that they can in the case management system, but don't really have a guidance on what's accurate or how these things are actually defined. So program year 18 might be a little bit better than 17, but we don't know right now. But that's what your agency reported, and so that's the numbers that RSA used to figure out where you're supposed to be as an agency. It's much more complicated than that, but hopefully that makes sense to at least everybody that's here today. So starting,
Sorry,
go ahead.
it's Brian. I'm sorry to keep jumping in on you.
No, you're fine. Please do.
It's whether it's good, bad, we're still checking things out. In the Q3 dashboard that RSA sent to us, it's showing us at 40.3% MSG, 40.6%. So we're already beating our goal if we can maintain that. Because obviously there's some math that goes behind the scenes, but
Right.
hitting our 35% should not be a problem, and we should exceed it if we continue on the track. And after this training, I hope that we'll be well on our way to exceeding those goals, because we'll have a better understanding and clean up what you're just talking about. Do we know what we're counting, and are we counting it correctly?
Yeah, that's really great to hear, Brian. And it is. I think most VR agencies feel like if they just accurately document what is, they'll have no problem meeting their targets or exceeding. Because 35%, that's a lot higher than some agencies. Some agencies, their goal's 18%, but that's below 50%. That means that you only have to help 35% of your participants earn a measurable skill gain. So the numbers are pretty low. And so, yeah, I I agree. I bet you'll be able to meet or exceed your MSGs too. But that's something that you're going to have to track over the next year. So that's another area where you guys might get communication from different people in your leadership, whether it's, gosh, you got to step it up, your caseload's really low, or hey, how come the folks on your caseload are not getting MSGs? Sometimes it's you just can't get the documentation. Sometimes it's the documentation sitting in the file and you didn't document it correctly in your case management system. So those are all the things we're going to have to figure out. But yeah, I bet if you just, most states are underreporting greatly. And so if we just increase accuracy and understanding, I agree. I think you'll do really great. So starting in program year 20, which started on July 1st of 2020, so we're just barely into the first quarter, that started your agency's expectation to get 35% MSGs. So by June 30th of 2021, your agency will have had to document 35% of your folks in a training program have earned an MSG. And we document that by you getting that information into the case management system. So we'll get into that more, but that's the basic target. And then for program year 21, your target is 40%. Now, without getting into too much of the details in the weeds, those numbers could still change based on who you're serving. And there's some, it could be adjusted by the end of the year, but that's the goal that you guys have to work towards. So some agencies are saying, okay, hey, counselors, each of you, in order for us to meet that goal, each of you need to be at least 35% of your own caseload, earning MSGs. So some agencies are tracking it that way. Some of the bigger districts or maybe higher populated areas, maybe Cheyenne, I don't know where in Wyoming it has the most population, but sometimes those are held, those caseloads maybe have a higher number and the more rural ones have less. So everyone's figuring that out differently, but those are your goals for your agency. And then after those 2 years, kind of like I said before, in program year 22, so July 1st of 2022, you're going to have targets on all of the participant level indicators. So that's when we're going to have a lot more tracking and expectations set on everybody. So in the chat, there's a couple of comments. So these are percentages. What are they percentages of? And are we in program year 21 now? So good question. So yeah, Brian said we're in program year 20. So the program year starts on July 1, and the program year is that year that's in July. So July 1 of 2020 is program year 20. July 1 of 2021 is program year 21. So hopefully that will help you guys remember that. But these are percentages. We're going to actually get into what these are percentages of when we break down the indicators. So good question, but we'll definitely get into that. Any other questions on what we've talked about before we get into the actual indicators? That's just a lot of background so that everyone's kind of on the same page of why this is important. So just want to make sure we're clear before moving on. Jeff, I forgot to ask you this, but are we going to need to take a break at all, or are we good to just go the full 2 hours and break at the end?
No, I think everyone's expectation was to just go the 2 hours and
okay,
do it that way.
Sounds good to me. Okay, so now we're going to get into the actual performance indicators. So there are 6 of them. Today we are going to talk about 2 of them. If you have any questions, please ask them. I'm happy to answer them. We also maybe can get into the others a little bit more on Thursday, depending on time. But based on what we just talked about and the fact that you have a target to meet for MSGs, we wanted to make sure that we spend the majority of the time talking about those. So these are the 6 performance indicators. There's a couple of things I want to make sure everyone understands. We've got our employment rate 2nd quarter after exit and our employment rate 4th quarter after exit. Those are the ones that we're talking about that the agency is going to be held accountable to whether somebody is working long-term. So 6 months-ish after you close their case and they exit the program, and a year after the program. There's a lot of lags and there's a lot of issues with the reporting. So you're not gonna know if somebody was working in the 4th quarter after exit until 18 months after you close their case. That's how long it actually takes to get all the data that we need. So that's just an example of why these are all still in baseline. It takes forever to actually get the data in that. Median earnings in the 2nd quarter after exit, that one is where we're starting to look at some quality of the employment outcome. So if we find that say that you close 100 people working in a quarter, the 2nd quarter after exit, say that the agency verifies that 50% are still working or employed in the 2nd quarter after exit. That means that the agency has to report all 50 of those folks found working. They have to report what their earnings were in that 2nd quarter after exit. That's where the median earnings comes from. And it's again, more complicated than that, but we're only looking at the individuals that were found working. Then we've got our credential attainment rate and our measurable skill gain rate, and we're going to go into depth on both of those. And then we've got our effectiveness in serving employers. This one's a little bit different for a lot of reasons. It is a statewide measure, so it is reported and measured together with all the 6 core programs. So you only report how you're serving employers as a state rather than how the VR program is serving employers. It's the only one that is not participant level. So it's how you're serving employers in the state. All of the first 5, you'll see, we want to know how we actually served Josh. Did Josh earn any measurable skill gains? Did Stephanie, what's Stephanie's median earnings rate? What's Brian's employment rate 4th quarter after exit? So all 5 of these, we're looking at the actual participants the agency served, and the effectiveness in serving employer is how the state of Wyoming serves employers. So let's get into our scenario of Jane, and I hope that everyone can relate to this in some capacity. Jane is a 24-year-old mother of 2 young children, ages 2 and 4. She holds a valid certified nursing assistant, CNA certificate, and has worked as a CNA off and on for 3 years. She has lost 3 jobs in the last 2 years because of depression, childcare, and transportation issues. Jane does reasonably well when she has her medication. Due to inconsistent income and insurance, she rarely can afford her medication, which intensifies her symptoms, and she isn't quite sure that she's ever found the right treatment. She wants help getting a job as soon as possible so that she can survive. And then after meeting with Jane, she's determined eligible and has an individualized plan for employment being developed. Can everyone relate to Jane as somebody that may come walking through your doors in VR? Okay, perfect. Again, it's just an example, but I hope that you can actually relate to this circumstance. I think we get a lot of people that come in and they want a job right away. They are hoping you have a job that they can walk away with. They don't realize how long the process can sometimes take. Sometimes they need some assessment, sometimes they don't. So anyway, I just want to make sure that everyone can at least relate to Jane in some capacity. So let's look at how Jane will be impacted by the credential attainment rate. So credential attainment rate is defined as the percentage of participants enrolled in an education or training program, excluding on-the-job training and customized training, who attain a recognized post-secondary credential or secondary school diploma or equivalent during participation in or within 1 year of exit from the program. Okay, so that is a mouthful, so I want to break it down for you. This is where the agency's not being measured on how many people go to a training program. So it's not about getting college or a training program on the IPE for individuals. That's not where the percentages come from. The credential attainment rate, we're actually looking at out of the number of individuals that are enrolled in an education or training program, how many of them actually attain what they were going to their training program for. So historically, we would send a lot of folks to a training program or college or different types of things, and maybe they would complete it, but then their job wouldn't match what they went to school for. Or we would send people to college and they would not finish the training program, and then they'd go right back into entry-level employment. So this measure kind of challenges those things. So once you actually enroll someone in an education or training program, whether VR is paying for it or not, that's not the issue. But once they're in an education or training program that's necessary or required for their IPE goal, we're going to be measured on what's the percentage of those participants who actually attain that credential. Now that can be a post-secondary credential, it can be a secondary school diploma or equivalent. So equivalent can be like a GED, for example. And we want to make sure that they earn that credential during participation in the program or within 1 year of exit from the program. So sometimes, you might help someone with an accounting program and say that they're almost finished with the program, and all of a sudden you lose contact with them. They won't call you back, mail's getting returned, email doesn't work, and you've just lost contact. Maybe you close their case, unable to locate. Can anyone relate to something like that? Transients, or if you just lose contact with them and you close their case?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'd be shocked if you couldn't relate to that. In that scenario, say that 6 months later, that person pops back up and they say, oh, hey, by the way, so sorry, I had to leave the country, or, I was really sick, or sorry, I had to move and things were crazy, but by the way, I did finish that associate or that accounting program. Thanks for all the help. Your agency can still document the attainment of that accounting program or that accounting certificate, whatever it is, as long as it was attained up to 1 year after exit from the program. So it's kind of cool. It opens up the door for, if we find out things that happen after the fact, we can still get credit for them. But most of the time in VR, we help people with their disability, with restoration services. We help them with training and anything they need to go to work. And usually we try to help them all the way to the work phase. So hopefully we have the majority documented during the life of their case. But if not, there is some leeway to where we can get credit if by chance we hear from them or learn that they actually earned something after the fact. So here's all now you guys don't have to really understand all of this on this slide, but I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the reporting requirements. So the credential attainment indicator requires 3 sets of data elements. So this is from the perspective of the RSA 911. So many of the quarterly certification form elements that you fill out, and I think maybe at plan as well in your system, a lot of those feed to these very specific required data elements. So it's really crucial that you understand where all these pieces are in your case management system so they get reported correctly. So for credential attainment, the first thing we have to do is document that they're actually enrolled in a training or education program that leads to a post-secondary recognized credential or a secondary school diploma or equivalent. So under enrollment, we document either data element 78, which is they are working toward a high school diploma and have that on their IPE, or data element 400 is they're working toward a recognized equivalent. So maybe a GED program, okay, to attain their secondary school diploma as an equivalent. Or for post-secondary education, so anything that they might be enrolled in, it could be a welding program, it could be a bachelor's degree, it could be a variety of training programs. We have to document that they're actually enrolled in a program, and that's data element 84. So again, it's really important to know where those things live so that you can document them correctly. Once we've told the feds that you've got someone enrolled, it's on their IPE, they're working towards secondary or post-secondary. Once you've documented the enrollment, now we're required to document whether they attain it or not. So data element 81 and 82 are for secondary education. Again, one's a high school diploma, the other is a recognized equivalent. And then we've also got all of the potential outcomes for post-secondary education. And I'm gonna show you the list on the next slide. But we have to make sure that we document the attainment. This is where the percentages come from. So if you document that 100 people are enrolled in a program that leads to a credential, but you only document 50 of them actually attained it in one of these data elements, then your rate's going to be at 50%. The rest of those are negative outcomes. So if you miss a checkbox or where you're supposed to put in a date, or you don't have the degree or the certificate in the case file to prove that the credential was attained, all of those things can affect your credential attainment rate. And then the last few are just the post-exit ones. So if it's applicable, if someone enrolls in a training program or they attain a credential after you close their case, these are the elements that we record. So, you know, most of the time you guys aren't going to have to worry about that. But I would say that if something happens, if somebody comes back and reapplies or they pop up after their case has been closed, I would make sure you talk, you know, go up the chain of command and make sure that you figure out how to get those things documented, or if it's still applicable, because you might not have access to your case management system at that point. So these are the, under WIOA, these are the very specific types of accepted credentials that are outlined. So we've got the secondary school diploma or recognized equivalent. Keep in mind that that does not include special education. So if you have someone that is in special ed and they are working toward a certificate of completion, maybe they get to continue going to school up until they're 22. Sometimes it's until they earn their diploma or until they age out at 22. If they earn a special ed certificate of completion, that is not a credential under WIOA because it's something different. They do get access to education, but they're not earning credits and they're not passing classes or Carnegie units as everyone else is when they're earning a high school diploma or passing GED exams. So keep that in mind. In order for something to be a credential, you have to be able to show that the person has met the standard outlined by these industries or institutions. So if they earn a high school diploma, it proves that they have the knowledge that anyone from high school should have, okay, because they passed all the classes. Or if they have a recognized equivalent, same thing. They passed the exams, they took the classes, and they proved that they have the knowledge of everybody else with a high school diploma. And then we've got an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, and graduate degree. So these are all credentials as well. It doesn't really matter what the degree is in, because following industry and education accreditation, in order to earn an associate degree, you have to follow a specific curriculum and earn 60 credits, right? If you earn 60 credits and didn't follow the curriculum, if you're missing a couple of prereqs or whatever it is, you're not going to be issued an associate degree. So the associate degree and the bachelor's degree and graduate degrees have very strict curriculum and number of hours and achievements you have to achieve before you get the degree. So that's why they count. And I will tell you the graduate degree, I've got a little blurb on there that says, for purposes of the VR program. I don't know if you guys know this, but under all of those 6 core programs under WIOA, the VR program is actually the only program that's allowed to provide any training above the bachelor degree level. So we're the only ones that can individualize our services to help someone above that level. So that's why it says for VR only. And then we've also got occupational certification, occupational licensure, other certificates, including registered apprenticeship and CTE certificates, and then other certificates of, then it's kind of the catch-all other, of recognized certificates of industry occupational skills. Does anyone have any questions on this? I want to make sure that everyone understands that these aren't just, if it's a certificate of completion or a certificate of attendance, or you earn a gold star for completing a program, those things don't meet the definition of a credential under WIOA. In order for it to meet WIOA credential definitions, it has to be one of these It has to be industry and occupational specific to teach someone real skills that are outlined under that industry or that educational standard. So while you're thinking of questions, let me give you some examples. Oh, actually, this slide, it just says who's included in the credential measure. Anyone who has a training program on their IPE. Okay, that's again more complicated than that, but all your participants who have participated in an education or training program, and especially for secondary, when they have the secondary school diploma or the recognized equivalent on the IPE. So you don't get to document credentials or measurable skill gains attained or achieved if they're not part of the IPE that we're saying that we support and are required to meet that IPE goal. Now remember, I didn't say paid for. So if you have someone in an education program that they've got FAFSA or scholarships that are paying for it, that's okay, that's a comparable benefit. But it still has to be part of their IPE, you know, to become a nurse, for example. Same with secondary, you know, we're not going to be paying for their secondary education. It's going to be provided through comparable benefit through their school district. But it still needs to be that they're working toward a high school diploma, or that GED has to be on their IPE in order for us to document the credential. Now here's a couple of examples. This list is definitely not exhaustive, but I wanted to make sure you had some examples of what do meet the definition and of what do not meet the definition, just to make sure everyone's clear. So if you have someone that goes to cosmetology or barbering school, sometimes that's at the community college level, so maybe there's an associate degree tied with it, or maybe it's at a local private school, and they finish the training there, and then they obtain a license in barbering or cosmetology. That would be a credential because they are licensed to perform that very specific type of work, and the license shows that they have those skills required to be successful in that type of work. Business enterprise program, so BEP, so any of the individuals that complete BEP and become a licensed business operator under some of our blind divisions, that would count as a credential. Career and technical education and job corps certificates. So those are often very industry specific. So sometimes you'll see cosmetology, sometimes you'll see welding, sometimes you'll see A+ certification. So any of those type of trainings are generally a credential because they're industry specific. That's what those programs do. Automotive service excellence is another example. So in order for you to work as a mechanic, if you get this certification, it shows that you have those skills. The high school diploma and GED, we already talked about that. And then Microsoft certified IT professional. So this is very different than Microsoft Office, right? So if somebody goes and takes a Word or they get certified in Microsoft Office, that wouldn't be a credential because everybody, you know, in a lot of industries, being proficient in Word and typing and PowerPoint, those are skills that are basic and general in nature and can be used across a lot of industries. It doesn't teach you how to do a job. It just gives you skills that would be beneficial in a lot of jobs. Microsoft certified IT professional, however, is teaching you how to be an IT professional that's actually going to work in the IT field. It's not that they're proficient in Word. So just wanted to give you a little bit more on that one. And then examples of credentials that do not count. So occupational safety and health administration, so OSHA certifications, CPR, first aid or food handlers, or ServSafe. All of those are general in nature or related to safety and hygiene in a lot of different industries. So OSHA training does not teach you how to be a construction worker. It teaches you basic safety requirements that are required on the job, okay? And a lot of these things, same with food handlers. Food handlers might be required in order for someone to gain employment, which is great. If these things are needed, you can still put them on the IPE and still support someone with them. You're just not going to document them as a credential because they don't meet the definition. Same with work career readiness certificates. So these are often issued over at your workforce center as well. teaching people like about the world of work, maybe building their resumes. Some of them have, that was my gold star example. Some of them have like a bronze, silver, and gold level that you have to pass through. Again, those are very general in nature, so they would not meet the definition of a credential. Completion of assistive technology training, so screen reading software, or completion of orientation and mobility training. All of those things, if you complete those, hopefully they'll give you the skills so that you can enroll in a training or education program that leads to a credential, but in themselves, they don't result in a credential. And then we already talked about this example as secondary school certificates of completion. Okay, let me get through our Jane example and then we'll stop for questions in this because I'm giving you a lot. So Jane came to VR with a license, or a CNA license, right? Before she even applied. Then let's say she earned an associate degree. So under Jane's situation, you guys decided that she was in the right field. She really could work and be successful in the medical field, but as a CNA, it was a high turnover job. She wasn't making a lot of money. She couldn't get any stability. So you wanted to help her to become a nurse. So her IPE goal was registered nurse. So she came in with a CNA. You helped her earn the associate degree in 2017. You helped her earn a bachelor's degree in 2019. She passed her NCLEX exam and earned an RN license in January of 2020. And then, sorry, computer issues. And then Jane exits the program on August 11th, okay? So she got her license, took her a few months to find a job, got working on the job. Once she'd been working 90 days, she was successful and you closed her case today. So if you guys could participate in the chat or chime in, I want to ask you now, did Jane earn a credential? Okay, getting a lot of yeses. Absolutely, she did earn a credential. So how many credentials did Jane earn? Based on everything we kind of just covered. Okay, getting some 3s, getting some 4s. Okay, great guesses. Okay, and then how many credentials are counted in the VR agency's performance? Is our third question. Any guesses on that one? Okay, really good guesses. Okay, let's break this down. So did Jane earn a credential? Absolutely. So Jane earned a CNA license, she earned an associate degree, she earned a bachelor's degree, and she earned an RN license. All 4 of those meet the definition of a credential under WIOA, right? But technically, those of you that said she earned 3 credentials was correct. She didn't earn 4. Why is that? Why did she only earn 3? Why does this CNA license not count?
Because she already had it when she entered the program.
Absolutely. So you guys remember the definition of a participant, right? Who can tell me what a participant is? Can you guys remember the definition of a participant? Yep, has an IPE and has a service, right? So IPE in place, signed by you and them, and they've begun receiving services. So we don't start actually counting or documenting credentials or MSGs until after she becomes a program participant. So anything prior to that IPE, you're still going to document and estimate, you know, when it happened and all those different things from a historical standpoint and as part of your assessment in planning for your VR services, but you don't document anything that happened prior to an IPE as credentials or skill gains. So she did earn the license, so you guys could move right on to associate degree. So once she earned the associate degree, you know what, she could have even come to you and had 1 semester left in her associate degree program. She could have been doing that on her own. So at the time of IPE, You say she enrolled in that training program, and you can just use your IPE date because that's when she became a program participant, right? And you can still document that associate degree 1 semester later because it happened with your support under an IPE, but after the IPE was in place. So, okay, so perfect. So she earned an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, and an RN license. All 3 of those things are a credential. So when we talk about how many credentials are counted in the VR agency's performance, that's where the kicker is. Under the WIOA calculations for credential, they actually only include 1 credential per participant. So when your agency does their calculations and they say, okay, was Jane successful and does she contribute successfully to the credential attainment indicator? They'll say yes. And they're going to say that Jane earned, they're going to say that Jane earned an RN license. That's what they're going to get credit for. Does that make sense to everybody? So the role of the agency, though, and the VR counselor is you have to document every single credential that's earned. If you think about how much time passed from an associate degree in 2017, a bachelor's degree in 2019, and a license in 20, a lot of time passes between there. So your role in all this is not to worry about how the calculations actually work on the back end or at the administrative level. Your role is just to document accurately real time as things happen. Once she earns her associate degree, document that. And I'll tell you that if Jane actually falls off, say that after she earns her associate degree, she ends up not wanting to go be an RN, and she goes and does something else, and you close her case in a totally different job goal, because you documented that associate degree, it still results in a positive outcome for the credential attainment indicator. So you don't want to wait till the very last one, 3 or 4 years down the road. You guys just need to document real time as it happens, and then let your agency worry about the calculations for performance. So Kelly asked a question. So in the dates of education achievement on the IPE, WIOA, and quarterly forms, we shouldn't list the dates of achievement for those things they got before IPE. Is that right? That's a really good question, Kelly. That's probably a question for Brian, because I think that your IPE form, I believe, tracks anything prior. And then I think after IPE, once you put it in the quarterly form and you update that, I think that that's when it actually calculates. So if you think about it too, if you do anything that she achieved prior on either of those forms, your enrollment date on those forms of an education or training program will probably be after those. And so none of this is going to start until the enrollment date either. And then you're going to look for achievement after that enrollment date. So there are quite a few pieces that kind of play a role and connect all the dots there. But that is a really good question. So I want to make sure you guys all have that answer from Brian or Kate. Or we can put that off until Thursday, Brian, if we need to.
Sorry, it's another one where I have another phone call in one ear and you in another ear.
Oh, that's okay. Do you want me to repeat the question?
No, I typed an answer into the chat. As far as for Kelly's question, regardless of what status, if you know that they have a degree, let's please enter it into the forms, even if there's only one date that you can't, and I'll discuss that one later on Thursday. But if you know that they come into you with an associate's degree, put the date down that they have the associate's degree, even if it was earned without VR's knowledge or assistance. It just helps us later on to say we help them advance to another degree, and now you're helping them with the bachelor's degree. So please enter that information in.
Okay, thanks, Brian. I'll tell you, depending on different agencies, everyone has different case management systems, so they all collect it very differently. Some agencies, there's a different spot for that they document anything earned prior, and then anything that's a credential, they report in a different page. Yours all lives on that one page, so just put anything that happened prior, and then once you have an IPE date and an enrollment rate, it will track everything that happens after the fact. So really good question. Don't freak out. You can only do the best job you can in your case management system. So no, they actually do track anything that happens prior to. It just means something different from the performance indicator standpoint. Another question is, what if she exits and works after achieving the associates and then reapplies later and gets the RN? Does that count, or is the one person per lifetime? Really good question. So under WIOA, there's something called period of participation. So it's one per period of participation. So if you close her case after the associate degree and you had documented the achievement of the associate degree, that would be a positive outcome. If 2 years later, or even 6 months later, if she comes back and reapplies and re-enrolls in school and later earns the license, that's going to be a new period of participation. So anytime there's a new case, the numbers all start over. Good question. Okay. Now let's move on to measurable skill gains. And like I said, we're going to have lots of time to talk about this on Thursday. So we wanted to make sure that we gave you time to process this. So after the training today, if you guys think about things, you guys are welcome to send me questions ahead of Thursday, or just come with your questions on Thursday and we can readdress or talk about anything that's needed. So don't feel like we're going to run out of time today. Okay, so moving on to measurable skill gains. Even though you're only being measured on measurable skill gains right now at the federal level, measurable skill gains are the interim progress toward a credential or employment. So the first step is really determining whether they are enrolled in a program that leads to a credential. If they're not enrolled working toward a credential, then there's only very certain limited circumstances that you would still document a measurable skill gain. So if they're not going for a credential, they're more than likely not going to earn measurable skill gains. And I'll give you the circumstances where that's not true. So just wanted to make sure you guys understood that this goes together. So under measurable skill gains, we're looking at the percentage of participants who, during a program year, now who can remind me what a program year is? Any guesses? Yep, see, July 1 through June 30th. So this is more applicable to the measurable skill gain indicator. So the percentage of participants, so the percentage of individuals in an IPE who during a program year, so the clock starts on July 1 every year and ends on June 30th every year. How many of them are in an education or training program that leads to a recognized post-secondary credential or employment, and who are achieving documented academic, technical, occupational, or other forms of progress towards such a credential or employment? So this is where we're going to start. So using the associate degree example, if you have someone that's enrolled in a program trying to earn an associate degree, the measurable skill gains are what we are going to use to document the interim progress to get to the associate degree. Same thing with a license. If somebody is going for a cosmetology license, the measurable skill gains are the interim progress leading up to earning that license. So depending on what the credential is, there's going to be different types of measurable skill gains that are documented in your system. Similar to the credential indicator, I wanted to make sure you guys understood all the components of a measurable skill gain in your case management system. So just like the credentials, first we have to document that they're enrolled. Now, even though it sounds the same as the credential, there are two different places in your case management system that you have to document the enrollment. So on your WIOA quarterly form, there's one place that says enrolled in a post-secondary or credential program, and there's another one that says enrolled in a, the language is very similar. You have to make sure you're documenting both of those because one is for a credential and one is for a skill gain. If you miss one or the other, then you're potentially not going to get someone in the denominator that should be. And even if you document measurable skill gains along the way, you're not going to get credit for them. So I just want to make sure that that's another area where you want to be sure is that you understand where to document data element 85, because that's how we enroll someone in the measurable skill gains indicator. Then this is brand new as of July 1, so you guys didn't have this option prior, but now you also have to document the completion or the disenrollment, and that's actually data element 401 in the 911. What that means is because the measurable skill gain indicator starts over every July 1, it means that one person, so talking about Jane, she can earn measurable skill gains every program year because the clock starts over. So credentials, it doesn't start over unless she reapplies and gets a new case. But for measurable skill gains, it starts over every July 1. So if somebody earns their associate degree or they drop out, say that on June 1st, she finished her associate degree, that's when it was earned. You want to make sure that you document that she completed that associate degree and that it either autofills. Brian, I don't know how your system works. Maybe you can look into this on Thursday. But, or you have to say, gosh, on June 1st, she dropped out of college. She's no longer working toward the associate degree. We want to make sure that we document that because on July 1, we want that data element 85 to no longer be applicable. We don't want to be held accountable to MSGs if she's dropped out of her program. Okay. And then we also have to document the MSGs that she achieved. And there's 5 different types, depending on the type of program she's in, that you can document. So these are the 5 measurable skill gains. So the first one is educational functioning level, which is an increase below post-secondary. So an educational functioning level is used to document progress for someone that's in an adult ed program. So they never earned their high school diploma. Now they've enrolled in an adult ed program and they are earning, they're earning Carnegie units, or most of the time this is documented by a pre and a post test. So you might have someone in an adult ed program and they take the TABE test, for example. Maybe they initially their pre-test is a 9th grade reading level and they need to get up to a 12th grade reading level in order to pass. Once you have that pre-test to show where they're at and then a post-test to show the increase, that would be an EFL. So if they test in at 10th grade and then they take some adult ed courses and retest that TABE test, if it shows, okay, now they're at an 11th grade. Awesome. That documentation is your EFL. So you would document that as achieved in your case management system. One thing you have to keep in mind, I don't know if I've said this specifically, credentials and measurable skill gains cannot be documented unless you have the third-party verification. So you can't just say that, gosh, well, I talked to the person on the phone today and they told me that they increased their reading level to 11th grade and document that. That's not sufficient. You have to have the pre and the post test to prove it. You have to have proof of the associate degree, okay, or the transcript that says that they earned the associate degree. So you have to have supporting documentation from a third party to prove most of these. And that should be outlined in any policies and procedures that you guys get. The second one is attainment of secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent. Where have you seen this one before? A high school diploma or recognized equivalent like a GED. Where have we talked about that before? Okay, perfect. We talked about it as a credential, right? You can document a secondary high school diploma or its recognized equivalent. The attainment of that can count as a measurable skill gain and as a credential. Okay, the reason for that is sometimes you have folks that go to high school and they graduate and they go right to work. So the high school diploma is a credential. That's their highest credential that they're going to earn. Then they're going to go to work. Other folks, that's a milestone. It's progress. It's a stepping stone to their post-secondary education. They earn the high school diploma, and then they enroll in post-secondary education. So for any time that they earn the secondary school diploma or its equivalent, we're also going to look at whether they enroll in post-secondary education or they are employed after the fact. So when they attain the secondary school diploma or the GED or whatever equivalent you guys have in Wyoming, make sure you document that as a measurable skill gain and as a credential, because it does count for both. And then number 3, so this is transcript or report card showing credits attained. Now, the guidance that came out from the feds was pretty specific, but there are some leniencies for you depending on what type of program they're in. The language shows that you can report a transcript showing the achievement of, for post-secondary ed, it needs to be 12 credits for a full-time student, or for a part-time student, it can be 12 credits earned within a 12-month period. So if you have someone that, because of their disability, maybe they start off by taking less classes. I think that's kind of a common scenario. Maybe in the fall semester, they start off part-time and they take 6 credits. So in December, when they finish that semester, they have not earned an MSG because they did not pass 12 credits worth of classes. But then if they enroll in 6 more credits for the spring semester, once they finish in the spring on May 15th and they pass the 6 other credits, that's a total of 12 credits within a 12-month period. So at that time, you would document the MSG. For secondary education, it's a little bit more vague. So you have to figure out in Wyoming, what does passing secondary school mean? Does it mean that they have a report card showing that they passed with a D- or above in all of their classes? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's they had to earn 12 credits within the year and it doesn't matter what they are. So you guys have to figure out what the Wyoming standards are for secondary school for someone passing a grade level or meeting the state standard. And once they do, and you have proof of that report card, either at the semester or at the end of the school year, that's going to be the documentation of your MSG. And then there's going to be other types of training programs that you can document the quote unquote equivalent. So if you have someone that's in a welding program, for example, maybe it's a private school and it's a 6-week program. Maybe the MSG is just once they complete the program because it's a short-term program. One of the states I work with, they've said that for their vocational tech programs, if they earn 450 hours, once they pass 450 hours, that's the equivalent to 12 credits in a college program. So that agency's chosen to say, okay, any of those other types of programs, once they've passed 450 hours, that's an MSG. Sometimes it's just going to be the completion of the short-term training program that's the MSG. So what I want you to understand, until you have actual guidance and policy from your agency, just make sure that you know that the transcript or report card has to actually show that granular data. It can't be a letter from the teacher that says that they passed junior year. You actually have to have a report card from the school or the school district that shows that they earned those credits. Same thing with post-secondary. You have to have the transcript that actually shows that they earned and passed those credits in order for you to document that MSG on your quarterly form.
Hey, Rachel, this is Jeff. I have a question.
Yeah.
So for that state that made that 450-hour benchmark, was that something that was approved from RSA? I mean, did they go along with that and say that that's legitimate, or did they get any pushback on that?
Nope, that's not something RSA determines, that's something you determine. So under the joint guidance that outlines these, it's Technical Assistance Circular 1701. It gives the full definitions for these 5 indicators. And under the transcript and report card one, it specifically says for a full-time post-secondary student, 12 credits, and then in parentheses it says or equivalent. And then it says or a part-time student, 12 credits in a 12-month period. Again, in parentheses, or equivalent. And then there's a little asterisk at the bottom that says for any program that's outside of the normal semester to semester program, you know, some are quarterly, some are hours, there's different types of training programs, you can determine what the equivalent is. So I believe that state actually contacted it was like a Voc Tech program that was tied to their community college. They contacted them and said, okay, what's an equivalent? And they set that standard. So anyone that doesn't achieve up to that, they just don't document a skill gain, and that's fine. So that's kind of the standard they took. Other states are just playing each of those case by case and determining it as they go based on the type of program that somebody enrolls in. So it kind of varies across different states.
Thank you.
So yeah, you guys can kind of put some parameters on. Some of this is flexible and you can put Wyoming, like Wyoming's stamp on it. You just have to make sure that it follows at least the minimum standard under the guidance. Okay, so number 4, good question. Thanks, Jeff. Number 4, this is the one that I really like because this is the measurable skill gain that you can get for someone that's not in a traditional training program. So the definition of measurable skill gain said, enrolled in a training that leads to a post-secondary credential or employment. This one's that or employment. So if you have someone that's not going to go to a traditional training program, whether it's a Voc Tech program or a public college or whatever it is, you can still document measurable skill gains if it's an OJT. So if you have someone enrolled in an on-the-job training and they are hopefully going to work with that employer and they're going to get training on those specific skills for that employer, at the end of the completion of that OJT, as long as you've documented the satisfactory progress, all the skills that they've attained, the employer signs it, you know, that's going to be your documentation. That can be a skill gain. There's some other types too, customized training programs. Some of those, I don't know if you have any in Montana, or gosh, I keep saying Montana. I don't know if you have any in Wyoming, but some of the common customized training programs are like with Sephora or with Starbucks or with CVS or some grocery stores. Oftentimes they'll have a customized training program where they train a group of individuals, whether it's a group of individuals or disabilities or not, but they have a training program that you can actually send your participants to and they get trained to work there. So again, it's the same idea as an OJT, but it's customized training. So any of those specific, really formal employer training programs can be documented as an MSG. I really like that because this is some of the paradigm shift, I think, for VR. Even though you may have somebody that has a most significant disability, or maybe they're on Social Security, or maybe their ability level doesn't warrant, or maybe they just don't want to go to college or go to a traditional training program, or it's just not appropriate. That's okay. Maybe they're not enrolled in a program that leads to a credential, but can we set them up with an OJT? Can we get them skills specific to an employer or a different industry using this method? Because if we send them to a job coach and just get an entry-level job, that doesn't give us credit for anything. Hopefully they'll be working and have long-term success in those employment indicators, but they wouldn't be included in the credential or measurable skill gain indicator. So it's just, you know, either way is fine. Those are both services that we provide under VR, but it's just a little bit different way to think about this and helping folks get training. And then the last one is successful passage of a required exam. So this can happen with an employer, or this can happen as part of a training program. So Jane, for example, in order for her to get licensed as a nurse, she will have to pass the NCLEX exam. Okay, that's showing that she has the knowledge to work as a nurse based on all that education she had. Same thing like the CRC exam. Any of those knowledge-based exams, or sometimes when you work with an employer, they will have benchmark exams that you have to pass within 90 days or something to get off probation. Some of those can be required exams. So anytime there's an exam that's required as part of the education or training program, in order to do the work, once they pass that, those exam results can count as an MSG. Okay, so question in the chat, can milestone be soft skills, communication, self-advocacy, emotional regulation, etc.? Really good question. The answer to that is no. So similar to credentials, remember how I think I said this. If something doesn't meet the definition of a credential, it most likely does not meet the definition of a measurable skill gain outside of like an OJT or a customized training. So measurable skill gains also have to be technical and occupational and industry specific. They can't be general skills or things that they might need that are more like pre-employment skills. So soft skills training, a lot of our clients generally need that type of training. That's okay if you need to send them to a CRP, or maybe there's a dedicated program where they can learn some of those skills. That might be part of your IPE planning, but that does not get documented as a credential or a skill gain. It's very, very different. Skill gains and credentials are industry and specific and occupational and have to actually show progress or knowledge gained. So hopefully by providing some of those soft skills or self-advocacy or any of those other types of trainings, hopefully that will provide them with the skills to increase their ability to enroll in a credential and or measurable skill gain training and actually be successful. So that's almost like the appetizer to what's next. Stephanie, there are hotels that have culinary training programs and so on. Could these be measurable skill gains? They might be. They might be. Those might be like a customized training program. What we would have to do is we would have to look at those specifically and see, do they actually result in like a culinary certification that qualifies them to actually go work as a chef or whatever the credential is? If so, it might meet the definition of a credential. Therefore, you would document transcripts or report cards showing the interim progress that they're making along the way. Or if it doesn't actually result in a credential, that could be maybe a customized training program where you can still document the training milestone. So it really depends on the program. So I would recommend anything that you guys have that's like a local training program, I would start talking about those with administration. Sometimes in some of my states, they will start creating like an in-house list so that you can say, gosh, anytime you've determined that something does meet the definition of a credential or a skill gain, it goes on this list. And if you've determined that it doesn't, it goes on this list. Again, I don't want to say that that doesn't mean you couldn't help someone with those programs. You still absolutely can, just like anything under an IPE. But just make sure you're only documenting credentials and measurable skill gains when they truly meet the definition under WIOA. Really good questions. Okay, just like on credentials, I wanted to give you MSGs that do count and examples of MSGs that do not count. So some of the things we talked about were gaining skills in reading, writing, and math. So anytime it's like below that post-secondary level, this example comes from adult education. So anytime you can show through a tape test, that pre and post test, or earning Carnegie units in reading, writing, or math, those will count as educational functioning levels. Passing scores on GED exams can be an MSG. 12 credits of post-secondary for an associate program or bachelor's program. Use that example for fall and spring semester. Report card showing passing of all classes in secondary education. Again, you're going to want to find out the specifics in Wyoming, you know, what constitutes passing. Because you wouldn't, just like you wouldn't document social skills because it doesn't count, meet the definition. Same with a certificate of completion for special education. You're not going to document quote unquote passing classes that they just passed because of attendance. They didn't actually earn any knowledge. So we want to make sure that for purposes of MSG and credential, passing on a report card actually means they have the knowledge. They got an A, they passed the class, they earned the credits for reading or whatever it is. Completion of an OJT, we just talked about that. And then just a couple of examples, the NCLEX exam like Jane that we're talking about, and then passage of an HVAC certification exam for a Voc Tech program. And then a couple of examples that do not count. I think I've mentioned some of these before, but yearly progression in special ed, so we just talked about that one. Transportation skill attainment. So sometimes you need someone they need to learn how to use the bus system or something like that. You might have to send them to get some training in that, and that's really great. And they might even get a certificate of completion that they mastered transportation skills. Just remember that that's a general skill in nature that can help lots of folks go to work. It's not teaching them how to do the job in their IPE, so it's not an MSG or a credential. And then I've got that example up there that we just talked about too, soft skills training. Pre and post tests, demonstrating mastery of orientational mobility. So again, orientational mobility or some of these other pre-employment skills or restoration related skills, they might be all of these on this slide can be very appropriate for you to help someone with under an IPE. But again, you got to remember, under WIOA, they don't meet the definition of credential or measurable skill gains. And then same thing of documented attainment of Microsoft Office skills and JAWS. Great skill to have. Hopefully that skill will increase the likelihood that they could enroll in post-secondary education and be successful. So let's finish Jane's example really quickly. And I want to quiz you guys again, okay? So CNA license. Jane had the CNA prior to becoming a VR program participant. So would you document any measurable skill gains for Jane's CNA? No, correct. Okay, just like we talked about with credentials, she earned it prior, so we're not going to get credit for anything. You're just going to document that she had earned it prior, and you're only going to document anything that was earned after IPE. So for her associate degree, let's say that her first year, she earned 12 credits. So let's say that Jane was really nervous to start college again. She hadn't been in training for a long time, so she did 6 credits in the fall and 6 credits in the spring and earned 12 credits in that first year. Then she really got rocking and rolling. In her second year, she was able to go full time for fall and spring. She earned 24 credits. And then her third year, she was able to finally earn her associate degree, again going full time, 12 in the fall, 12 in the spring. So she earned 24 credits. So how many measurable skill gains did Jane earn for her associate degree? All guesses welcome. Five, really good guess. Any other guesses? 5. 3. Okay, really good guesses. 3 to 5. Okay, so as most of you are starting to see, because measurable skill gains are based on a program year, we're looking at what happened during that year. So during the first program year, she earned 12 credits. We know 12 credits is a skill gain. 1 there. During the second year, she earned 12 credits in the fall and 12 credits in the spring. So that could be 2, or maybe you only documented 1 of those for that program year. Same thing with the third year. She actually earned 2 different MSGs, 1 in the fall and 1 in the spring. Maybe just 1 got documented, so 3 to 5. So you guys are exactly on track. Next thing, bachelor's degree. So now she really just wants to get done, right? Like she's just doing everything she can, doing double time. Maybe she took some summer classes or whatever. So for the 4th year, she knocked it up to 30 credits. And the 5th year, in order to earn her bachelor's degree, she passed 30 credits. So again, how many skill gains do you think Jane earned? Okay, good guess is 2 to 4, right? She earned at least 12 credits in the fall, at least 12 credits in the spring, and maybe a little bit more. So you could have documented 2 there. Maybe you just documented 1 for the program year. So yeah, it all comes down to, did she earn enough credits to meet the definition of a measurable skill gain? And then did you document it accurately as an MSG? So anywhere from 2 to 4 could depend on her circumstances. And then lastly, in order to get her registered nurse, in her last year, she had to study and pass the NCLEX exam. So did she earn any measurable skill gains for the NCLEX? Absolutely, she earned 1 because the passage of an exam, an industry-related exam, counts as a skill gain. So you guys are right on track. You're getting this really well. So yes, did Jane earn any MSGs? Absolutely, she earned many. And because Jane's educational program under her IPE lasted for 6 years, she was enrolled for 6 years, that means she can earn up to 6 measurable skill gains and probably many, many more than that. How many MSGs did Jane earn? Again, depending on what was documented and depending on the circumstances, we kind of outlined the associate degree, maybe 3 to 5, the bachelor's degree, maybe 2 to 4, and then we know at least 1 for the NCLEX exam. The kind of trick question is, how many MSGs are counted in the VR agency's performance? Any ideas? Let's say that she earned 10 MSGs. How many are included in the agency's performance? The ones we document, okay, that person gets a gold star, absolutely. The ones you document for sure.
Great job, Aunt Rachel. Baird.
Any other guesses? I haven't seen the correct guess yet. Yep, 6, once a program year. Okay, so remember, kind of like the credential indicators for the life of the case, the whole time that person is enrolled in the program or up to 1 year after exit. You're going to document everything that happens, but the highest credential earned is what's going to actually get calculated. It's kind of similar with MSGs. So you as the counselor, you're going to document all the measurable skill gains that happen, whether it's every semester, whether it's every quarter, or whether it's once a year. From the agency standpoint, when all the calculations happen on the back end, they're going to take the last or the highest MSG earned and use that in the calculations. So for the associate degree for the second program year, 24 credits. The reason I said 3 to 5 is because you might document 12 credits earned in December and 12 credits earned in May. You document both of those in the case management system, but the one that's going to be included in the agency's target calculations is the last one, the final one. The reason, again, this is really important is if you guys can get in the habit of documenting all these real time, then if you document one in December, but happen to miss the one in May or June, you're already covered. You're still going to have a positive outcome. Some agencies are just requiring that they document one within the full year. They don't care when, or you can get it at the end of the year. That's up to you guys, but I would recommend document any measurable skill gains that happen during the program year, but make sure you, at a minimum, you're documenting one, because that's what's gonna be included in that measurable skill gain rate. Okay, so just to wrap up, we've got about 5 minutes left. So I know there's probably a lot of questions, but I want to give you time to kind of process this for Thursday. So wrapping up Jane under WIOA with the credentials and measurable skill gains that she earned, this scenario goes on to say that Jane and the VR counselor determined that it is vital to stabilize Jane's depression before understanding her employment potential. The VR counselor assists Jane with finding an appropriate doctor and therapist to treat her depression. So you've got all the general things that VR does handle. During this time, Jane and the VR counselor determined that Jane has the aptitude and desire to become a nurse, which provides great career stability, which leads to self-sufficiency. Jane finds a job as a CNA temporarily while she completes her school. This provides her the means to take care of her monthly responsibilities and adds relevant work experience to her resume. Together, the VR counselor and Jane develop an IPE with the goal of nurse and engage in a variety of services over the next few years. So Jane exits the program with a successful employment outcome. So let's look at how this might look from the indicator standpoint. So because Jane is no longer in a high stress, low pay, high turnover job that her history shows is not going to be long term for her. Now she's a licensed registered nurse. She's got the skills to be successful, and she's making really good wages. So that's going to increase the likelihood that she's working in the second quarter after exit and working in the fourth quarter after exit after she leaves the program. You've greatly increased the chances that she's going to be successful long term versus had you just found her a CNA job that lasted 90 days to help meet her immediate needs. Instead, you did that, but you also made sure she was set up for the future. And I don't want you guys to think I'm saying everyone has to go and get a professional license. This is just an easy example for learning, but just keep that concept in mind of there's a difference between maintaining a job for 90 days versus having the skills and you increasing the likelihood that someone can be successful on their own long term. So for median earnings, we're also, we've increased her median earnings a lot, you know, from being maybe a part-time CNA employee at $10 an hour to maybe she's making starting $65,000 a year as a nurse. You know, she's got insurance, she's got higher wages, she's probably got retirement. She can probably work overtime if she needs to. So all of those will potentially be positive outcomes. Credential attainment rate and measurable skill gains, you'll see that I documented a 1 and then a plus and then a 6 and a plus. And that's just to reinforce that concept that in the calculations on the back end that your administration has to worry about, only one of the credentials, the highest one earned, will be pulled in the calculations, and same with the skill gains each year. But we know that you've documented way more credentials and way more skill gains that actually tell the true story of Jane throughout her training. And then effectiveness in serving employers. The only reason that has NA is because remember that the effectiveness in serving employer indicator is a state measure that shows how Wyoming has served employers. It's not looking at Jane's outcome. However, say that Jane got a job at one of the large hospital chains in Wyoming, and the HR department needed some help setting up accommodations for Jane. That opens up the door where you can be part of the business relations with that employer and potentially provide them services to help them retain employees with disabilities, and also open up maybe an avenue to get more individuals with disabilities placed in employment in that setting. So it really does come full circle. It just doesn't show up when we're just talking about Jane's situation. So just wanted to share that with you a little bit. Okay, I'm amazed that we really got to part 2 all within our 2-hour time frame. So I'm happy to stay on for any last minute questions or anything. But before I let you go, you guys have some homework to prepare for Thursday. So I want you to, when Jeff sent out this PowerPoint, he also sent 2 attachments. I've got 2 more client scenarios. We've got Scott and we've got Leonard. I want you to review those scenarios, and there's a bunch of questions that happen after the fact, and we're going to talk about the same things we did with Jane. We're going to talk about the potential for long-term success. We're going to talk about what potential measurable skill gains you'd be documenting and what credentials you might be documenting in those circumstances. And we'll also do some other follow-up on Jane. And then there might be a few other things that we can talk about just based on time and do some Q&A on Thursday. So that's what you can expect for Thursday. But Jeff, that's all we have for today, I think, unless there's any other questions.
Well, thank you, Rachel, and thanks to everybody for being so engaged and asking such great questions. if you have any questions for Rachel between now and Thursday morning, you can email those to me and I will create a list to provide Rachel so that she makes sure to cover those next time. And if you did not get those attachments, I sent those out yesterday in the email that I said you did not need to read through that before this morning. But if you did not get it, please contact me and I can forward that to you rather easily. But again, great job. Thank you, Rachel. Great job for you. And we will convene again on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock.
Okay, thanks everybody.